Hey there, my name's Sebastian, and this is Talk That Pod, a podcast where I have conversations with some of the most interesting podcasters in the world. My guest today is Chris Stewart, creator and host of the History of the China podcast, a show that has been running since 2013 and now boasts over 330 episodes that aim to examine the entire 5,000 years of Chinese civilization. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so I'll jump right into it. Maybe tell me a bit about yourself, about your background, about the podcast, and sort of what the origin story of the show is.
Yeah, sure. Well, I am from the U.S. I'm from Montana, and that's where I am once again. But for a long period of time, about 17 years, I was living in China as an educator over there. Of all the different kind of age groups and many different topics, so a lot of history as well. And over the course of that period of time, decided that podcasts seemed like a way to do something with a topic that I was interested in that could potentially, I didn't really know what I was getting into to begin with. I thought, how hard could it be?
Sure.
And 13 years later, still figuring that out.
Right. Yeah. So you started the show, I'm guessing, sort of to partly learn the history of the country that you were living in. I guess you were living in Shanghai. I'm curious how your understanding of China shifted from when you first started the podcast to now, 330 episodes later.
Well, a lot, suffice it to say. Yes, started it in Shanghai and continued it all through my stretch there. I'd already had some background in Chinese history. I did my undergrad in history generally, and then I did a capstone on kind of more modern Chinese history, the Nanjing Massacre in the Second World War. And I'd done some studies on Confucianism, and I'd taken Mandarin as my minor as a language. And then I'd gotten the opportunity to go over there and then stayed over there for longer than I thought it was going to be. It was supposed to just be a year. But it certainly was, listening to shows that I got into really early on, some of the great history shows, like at the time what Mike Duncan was doing, the history of Rome, and then revolutions, and it'd be just plain wrong of me to not mention like Dan Carlin and hardcore history. I was listening to a lot of that, and I thought, I did actually do a look on Apple Music at the time, and I'm like, is there something like this that's for Chinese history?
Right.
Didn't find it, and it turns out there kind of was. There's Laszlo Montgomery's show, the Chinese History podcast.
Okay.
He also does it, but he does it in a different way. But I didn't know that at the time. So I thought, I don't see anything here. Again, how hard could it be? Foolish youth that I was. And so it's just been a process of taking that topic that I've already had a substantive background in and interest in, living where it seemed like, well, this seems to be the obvious place and point in my life where I would stop and do something like this. Not that I stopped, but and then kind of exploring that out to see where it went, and watching it kind of grow into what it's become.
Yeah. So when you first started it, did you kind of envision it as kind of a multi-year affair? Did you sort of underestimate just how much, 5,000 years of history contains for just one country?
Yeah. I can only really ever say that it's a half joke, because I kind of half believed it at the time. I thought, I bet I can do this. I bet I can knock this out in like a couple, like dozen episodes, and I'll just have gotten some. I've done this as a hobby, and then it will just be in my rearview mirror, and it will just be whatever.
Yeah.
And nope. Turns out that the more you get into something like this, the deeper that rabbit hole tends to become.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially in the format that I tend to do it, which is kind of chronologically going forward in time, the closer we get to modernity, the more extensive the sources survive to become. And so it's just ever deeper.
Yeah.
And that's a double-edged sword, but
Yeah.
it's part of the fun of it.
So as you said, you were living there at the time when you first started it. I'm curious how that shaped the podcast too. You know, being physically there, being immersed in the current culture. Did that have an impact on the podcast?
I mean, yes, it did. Not directly, like I would say, like, oh, because I was in China, that gave me some wonderfully better perspective on things necessarily. In some ways, it did. It certainly made me, from the outset, very much have to be a problem solver in my own right, just even from the technical background, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Just like podcasting as a medium has gotten better now. Like this platform that we're on, Riverside, is kind of like you just click play and it goes, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it makes things easier for sure.
Absolutely. But back, in 2013 and the like, it was held together with baling wire and duct tape. It was, I had to find out what an RSS feed was and like how I could hook into that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is at the same kind of general time where China itself, the PRC, never really an open information country to begin with, was actively going into what's now its current phase of like real informational suppression, really locking down the internet after the 2008 Olympics. And so just watching all these websites, even down to things like Google search and Wikipedia, being progressively locked down. And how do I continue trying to do what I'm doing, which is going to be incredibly dependent on digital access in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Continue to do that. VPNs are mostly the answer. But it certainly got me to think very early on of like, oh, I need to have kind of a system in place for backups and be at least aware of what it is I'm saying and what that might do.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't even think about that aspect of it. That's very interesting. Now, you mentioned earlier sources and how they become more plentiful as we get closer to modernity. I've had the luck of interviewing other history podcasters so far as well, and I've asked them about their research process and how they deal with their sources. And I'm curious how you sort of deal with the fact that when you go back, to ancient times, to sort of the beginning, a lot of the events that are described are often written about centuries later, right? And so
yes.
I'm always curious how historians and people that run history podcasts, how do they decide, which sources to trust and sort of when to question them? What's that process like for you?
Yeah, I think it's certainly become one of the questions that I play with the most, or I think about and kind of process with the most, the historiography of the history of China. I've tried to actually make a part of the show in some senses. I kind of, at some points, tried to bring the listener in and be like, well, our sources don't really actually tell us about this, so we don't know. We have several different versions of what happened here, and so it's kind of up in the air of like, did the emperor run away and, fade into the background as sort of this legendary figure, or did he die in a fire that his uncle set? We just don't know. And that's kind of, it's nice to have become comfortable enough with the ambiguity that's present in the sources to be able to say, you know what, I don't know either, but here's some good possible stories that we can tell, some other things that we can draw. And as long as I'm forthright with the listener and we're kind of in that journey together, it's okay to not know everything.
Sure.
Because it's just an honest sort of accounting of the sources. In terms of what sources I use and how to trust them, it's always a negotiation, I think. Whenever I can, and I've gotten better about it, I try to get the most, up-to-date and modern and most well-received publications and scholarships that I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of scholarly consensus about, well, this is a good book on this topic. This is a good book on that topic. Going back into the primary sources when I can, as I can, you run into a big translational issue.
Sure.
But just straight, from English to Mandarin, which has become a lot more manageable with the internet, with translation services and what have you. But even, as languages go back in time, they change so radically that even if you read Mandarin natively, if you go back and you read Sima Qian or the Confucius analects rather directly, it comes across as nonsense because it's in this high poetic language.
Interesting.
It's like the Spring and Autumn Annals, which is one of the sources for the Warring States period. When you read it in Chinese, you actually have to have like a second book of bylines and like notes on it that other scholars across history have also taken in Chinese of like, oh, this is what he's actually trying to say here. This is what this. He's making a reference to this ancient poem that was lost 500 years ago. So it's a process of negotiation and translation. And I think it also goes back to with the ancient sources, especially at some point you kind of have to accept the fact that you're dealing with kind of a Herodotus. Yeah, I think of Sima Qian as like a lot of like the Chinese Herodotus, which is everything that he said true and accurate in like a historical sense? No, probably not. Can we knock a zero off of a lot of the numbers that he gives for like army formations? Probably.
Sure.
I've gone into like, how some of the numbers that are given just make no sense for what could be fielded, physically on a battlefield of that size at that time.
Right.
But it's sort of like, yeah, but it makes a good story and the numbers for effect. So you kind of just have to roll with it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, in many cases, you've got virtually nothing at all to go with.
Yeah, that's all fascinating. It seems to me that Chinese people, the Chinese population, are very proud of the fact that they belong to this, 5,000-year-long sort of continuous civilization and culture. You even see it in some of the discourse when the Chinese make fun of Donald Trump with, not so subtle jabs at the fact that the U.S. is, only now turning 250 years old. Am I making a correct observation in terms of that pride, or is that incorrect?
No, you're correct that it's absolutely there and it's real and it's heartfelt. It's also, I would say, it's more complicated and it's more nuanced and it's often presented externally as a nation state, as a government. The Chinese government has a vested interest in kind of portraying itself as this monolithic unibody.
Sure.
When there's an especial like political insult or what have you, they'll often say something like, the feelings of 1.4 billion Chinese people have been hurt. Just all lumping together as just this one body that moves and thinks together. Never has been the case, never will be. It's a 1.4 billion people with 1.4 billion different opinions. People feel differently about different parts of Chinese history. People relate to other parts more than others. People in the North are much more likely to kind of have a more friendly memory of potentially, the old Qing dynasty than the Southerners were, who have a much, more hostile memory to that. There's a lot of North breakdown difference, but it's kind of like, nobody punches my brother except for me. When talking to outsiders, most Chinese people are definitely going to default to, yes, very proud of it all, continuous civilization, no notes,
right.
That's the story.
I think you do a really fantastic job of sort of blending the kind of serious, rigorous history telling, but with a very sort of human, sometimes kind of dryly humorous storytelling style. Especially in some of your kind of one-offs, like your strange tales. How do you manage that line sort of between, academic respect and kind of pure storytelling entertainment, so to make sure that the podcast is not putting people to sleep, right?
Well, first off, there is a contingent of listeners that I know and I respect and I'm proud of who use me as a sleep aid.
Fair enough.
And a few barbacks who've used me to put on for themselves as they do closing time at the bar to get the drunks out.
All right.
I respect that. What it has been to me, and I think I approach this kind of topic as somebody who enjoys history, just myself.
Sure.
I find it interesting. I'm also an educator. I not only got my degree, my undergrad in history, but then I got my master's in education. So I come at this with sort of this psychological aspect of like, well, how do I get this to the people who I want to get it to in a way that they're going to be capable of digesting it. I've always tried to treat my listener as I would want to be treated as a listener of a podcast, where it's like, I sought this show out. I'm trying it. I want to find out about this topic, but I don't necessarily know a lot about it because I know most people in my life. I mean, not when I was in China, but in my life here now, amongst my family and friends here in the West, they know what they learned about China from middle school history that was about 2.5 paragraphs long and once a year, maybe.
Right.
There's not a whole lot there for them. So I'm going to treat you as intelligent, as engaged, as curious, as able to follow the plot, basically, as long as I can break it down into manageable, comprehensible chunks. And I think that especially with histories that are outside of the norm for what we experience culturally day to day, something like Chinese history is way out there. It's a topic that's feels very alien and very unapproachable in a lot of ways, linguistically, culturally, time-wise, all that stuff. And so if I'm going to get anybody interested in this, if I'm going to maintain interest in this myself for the long run, as it's become, I have to be able to think of these people as three-dimensional humans that I can comprehend and understand and kind of, I can try to at least wrap my headspace around.
Yeah.
Where it becomes fun is if I can get enough information, I can put it together enough where I can kind of, I'm not going to ever say that I can like get in their minds or anything, but I can at least try to put myself in a situation of like, well, if I was living in that kind of a time and that kind of a place under this kind of operational parameters about what to think and how to think and what the world was, and I was faced in a situation like this, and I reacted in this way, what would be my rational basis for that? It's not just a character in a story. He's doing something for a reason, or there's a force or a pressure on him, and it's explainable. And I think if we get away from just the character of the person, he was crazy, he was a mad king, and you get out into the larger questions of that, then it stops being something that's so unapproachable and on a pedestal and kind of mythological, and it starts being more human and more grounded. That also means that you can kind of make it more human and make it more grounded and say, oh, that was a dumb thing that he did. Or especially you said the Stranger Tales. One of my favorite one-off kind of, I do it yearly kind of a thing. And it was, I just wanted to start learning more about Chinese ghost stories and ghoulie stories. I wanted to do the supernatural thing because it was Halloween. I'm like, there's nothing that goes on for Halloween in China. It's not a holiday there.
Right.
Sort of as in like big cities, but only for little kids. But what does that look like? Where did those ghost stories come from? And you go into where I get most of them from, which is this guy called Pu Songling. He just compiles a bunch of old folk stories, and he just calls them weird tales or strange tales, which is where it comes from. And they really are. They're not like all. It's not like scary stories to tell in the dark. It's not all terrifying. Most of them are just kind of weird and like, oh, that's a weird thing that happened. Or like, I saw a guy and he looked funny. Or a woman, made an adult toy out of something strange today. It was, what? What did I just read? And that sort of just the commonness of the experience of it allows itself. It doesn't take itself that seriously. It's just like, oh, here's this weird story that I heard. And so when you can read it like that and you get that implication, then it starts to just be like, oh, this is just a guy telling a story to his friends over a bar or over a drink at a bar. And like how weird that was the other day. And that makes it super easy to kind of just tell us like, well, let me just tell you about this thing one time. So yeah, that's.
Yeah. Now, given your experience living in China, given your knowledge of Chinese history, I imagine you're a fairly keen observer of sort of modern geopolitics and how China is involved. I'm curious, are there any episodes or a series of episodes from your podcast that, if you could require sort of, every Western policymaker to listen to kind of help and inform them about, this is what China's really all about?
Oh, well, whenever I hear somebody say something like that, this is what it's all really about. It's sort of like, oh, wait, hold on. I'm gonna really take what this person has to say with a grain of salt, because what I've determined for myself that it's all about is it's not all about anything. It's a vastly complicated civilization that is just it's hard to get a whole grasp of, and especially in the span of like a Twitter post. Not going to happen.
Sure.
I think in terms of my recommendations for like, here's what you should definitely listen to, I'm always going to be more inclined toward my more recent stuff because it's certainly just more in my head. The project that I'm working on now, the series that I'm working on now, is on the Taiping Rebellion, which I've been looking forward to for a long time. And just prior to that, the first Opium War. So that's in the middle 1800s. Starts in the 1840s, and now we're into the 1850s. I would say, I could say pretty confidently that if you want to get a good understanding of how modern China today, sort of where the roots of that came from, and both the way that it feels positively and proudly about itself today, and very protective of that mythical 5,000 years of culture and civilization, and but also the thin-skinnedness, the ability to take a quick insult, the amount of grievance and chip on the shoulder that is still there and has been there and will continue to be there for a long time to come. You can make a lot of hay out of starting with the Opium War and the Taiping Rebellion, because that's when the great and mighty and invincible, eternal Qing dynasty, which was the current iteration of the even more ancient imperial system, 2,000 years long, hit a speed bump so big that it could never recover.
Okay.
Which was Great Britain and the West coming in and saying, this is our play space now.
Right. Yeah, good place to start for sure. Okay, I want to switch topics a little bit and talk about, your experience in promoting the show. You've been running it for a long time. You've been independent. Now, I think you're a part of the Airwave Media network. I'm curious what changed for you sort of creatively and practically once you joined a network versus going it alone.
Yeah. I am part of Airwave now. I've been with them for several years at this point. They're a good partner. They're not the first partnership I worked with. I worked with a collective that was called Agora, and that was going strong for a long time. That said, I am just as much of an independent creator within the context of Airwave that I was before them. It's a partnership that primarily I'm getting things like ad revenue from. They help me do programmatic ads at the beginning and end, and I slot one in the middle mostly now of the show. And they help me with try to pull people who might be, and it's kind of like they have a bunch of shows together that they can kind of go to different companies and be like, we've got this whole pool that you can, advertising together. It makes it more attractive. But in terms of what to say or how to say it, I was as clear as I could be, and they were totally on board with it from the get-go. Of they came to me, they said, you know, we love your show, we'd like you to kind of join up, but we think we could make you more money with the ad stuff than you're probably now. I'm like, well, it seems like a pretty decent thing to try.
Yeah.
And they said, but we don't want to have anything to do with how you do it. So you just keep doing what you're doing. So I've got the whole shebang still on my end, and I don't have to ask or answer to anybody on that front. There has been, so on that end, it's been a lot of maintenance of the same kind of solo work effort that it was from the outset.
Right.
That said, there's also there's little informal networks of history podcasters that I group together with and have been in and out of and a part of for a long time, and they're great people.
Okay.
There's a little speech group that does a yearly thing that Agora formed. It was Intelligent Speech. I just did it last year as well, which is just fun. It's nice to talk with other people that have similar passions like that.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions about whether you collaborate with other history podcasters, but you answered it there. I don't know if you agree with this, but it feels to me like the history podcasting genre is quite crowded, perhaps now in a way that it wasn't back in 2013 when you started the show. I'm curious how you think about bringing in new listeners to the show now, because, you've got this big back catalog, but, to come in to, episode 310 or 320, that can be kind of a tough entry point, I think. So I'm curious how you think about that, about bringing in new listeners, people that have never thought of, or heard about your podcast.
It's an amazingly relevant, it's a continuously relevant question all the time, and it's exactly for what you say, which is, 330 episodes of something is it's a great thing to be able to say. It's like it's something that I feel is really kind of cool. But it's also, I can definitely understand it being incredibly intimidating. Of I don't know if I'm ready to sign up for that.
Right? Yeah.
What I've tried to how I've tried to address it within the context of the show itself. I tried to do this fairly early on, and then kind of just kept with it, was segmenting it into the respective dynasty or period that I've tried to basically have the beginning of any of those function as a bit of an on-ramp for, it's like, hey, if you just want to learn about the Mongol Yuan dynasty, you can start there.
Right.
And you're going to maybe play a little catch up, but it's not going to be like I'm dropping things on you from 100 episodes prior just out of the blue. And I continually, and I think this goes back to just me being, a high school history teacher in general I was doing U.S. history for the most part, up to the AP level in high school. But these were kids in Shanghai going to an American school, but they weren't American kids by and large. They were Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese, Eastern European, South Asian. You notice I didn't say one.
Yep.
Mainland Chinese. They can't go to international schools in China. You have to have a foreign passport for that. Count Taiwan. It was at the school with the U.S. curriculum, which means that you've got to have a basis in U.S. history. But I can't approach that topic for a 9th grader or a 10th grader or an 11th grader fresh off the plane from Tokyo.
Sure.
As I could with somebody from, LA or Washington or who has that sort of lifelong basis. I have to be able to be like, okay, well, here's what we're talking about. Here's kind of why it's important. Here's how we can get you to play catch up so that when we talk about the War of 1812, that's going to make sense to you and not just be a random number on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
And so in education, that's called scaffolding. building up kind of a ladder of understanding, meeting the listener or the student where they begin rather than where I want them to end up, expecting them to come up to my level. We're gonna move up the ladder together, which is why I tend to sort of speak. I try not to be circular in the way that I speak, but I'll tend to throw out several examples of something kind of in sequence, or kind of look at the same topic from a few different angles in succession, to be like, well, if you think of it this way, it's like this. If you think of it that way, it's like that. Metaphor, comparison, it helps open up the possibility, I think, of getting an entry point into understanding of a topic that could otherwise be really intimidating and off-putting. That's kind of more or less my answer. It's a known issue. I know that I could probably have a much wider audience if I wasn't talking about such a niche topic for so long.
Yeah.
But both in terms of episode length, I've tried to keep it mostly at like the half-hour to three-quarter-hour format, so that you just don't get lost in the weeds in that episode. I've tried to really focus down on the number of like names of people that I use, because I've taken the notes from listeners. That's really hard for people, and I totally get that. Chinese names are really hard for Westerners for a lot of different reasons. So it's like, I know I can only put in so many people in an episode, and what Chinese history loves to do is just throw about 1 billion names at you and be like, this guy's going to come up once, but here's his name.
Right.
I can't do that. So it's a process of paring that down.
It certainly seems like your background as an educator has influenced and really helped shape the podcast. And I think that's probably part of the reason why you've had success with it, is you're keenly aware of all of this. You're aware that, you have to sort of, as you said, trim things to tell a good story, but again, to bring in new listeners as well. Yeah. As any podcaster, you probably pay attention to your analytics, to your downloads. I'm curious, have there been specific episodes or specific series where you noticed like a significant jump in audience growth?
The biggest one was actually right at the very beginning, and it was the most random thing. I think I put up 3 or 4 episodes all at once, just kind of getting my show off the ground of like, bada boom. And it was crap. You can't find those episodes anymore. Those are not online. I read those from the ground up after I realized that I didn't do a very good job. But I just so happened to somehow luck into getting into, on the Apple Music store, the podcast section, the like what's hot, or like what's new and hot section. I forget exactly what it was called, but it was like up and coming podcasts or whatever. And I somehow got into that just randomly. And so I went from 15 listens or something to like thousands, just right off the bat. And it's like, whoa. So that was probably the most psychologically biggest bump of like, whoa, maybe this does have the potential to have legs a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Apart from that huge jump, I would say that it's been more a process of just kind of gradual accumulation.
Sure.
I can say that there's been kind of a steady state growth. And then it'll kind of level off for a time period. I usually don't see that line trending down. That's a nice thing. What I don't really have, I guess, is that kind of like blockbuster breakout. Like, this is the one that everybody must listen to. But rather, it's kind of like trying to be consistently good or decent most of the time. I would like to hope that maybe this current series that I'm on, I'm particularly like buzzed about. So I'm hoping that gets people maybe more interested as well, but time will tell.
Yeah. I also notice you rely on Patreon and direct listener support. I'm curious what you've learned about converting somebody that is perhaps a casual listener into someone who actually pays to support your podcast and maybe, things you've tried that don't work as well?
I certainly wouldn't suggest that anybody listen to me for advice on how to monetize. I'm not good at it.
Okay.
It is a very...
I think you'd be surprised. I think you probably do it better than a lot of other podcasters.
Oh, well, then I appreciate that. What I've tried to do is not a lot. It's kind of been a less is more philosophy of I didn't start the show to have it be a money-making enterprise. I didn't start it with the goal of being super mega successful or make money or have advertisers or anything like that. It really was I was teaching English to pre-kindergartners in a school in Minhan district of southern Shanghai, slowly losing my mind because I was just saying A, apple, B, ball 5 days a week, on and on and on. And I was like, I'm going to go insane if I don't sort of rev my brain up a little bit somehow.
Yeah.
So it was a project for myself. It was just like, how do I break out my big boy words for a purpose that I can sort of get behind? And having that intrinsic drive to just continue on. It's my wife has long told me that I was born in the year of the ox. So I kind of have that mentality of just gonna grind forward. So I just try to make the best version that I can do of what I'm doing and put it out there and say, hey, here it is. It's free. But here's a link. And if you want to support my show, if you want to come on board, I'd love to have you. I try to make it as easy as possible. With Patreon, especially, what they did, they're being forced to move away from it now, I guess, over the next year or so. But I'm still on the plan, which has really kept me honest as a creator, which is anybody who is a patron of mine on that service, they pay per episode that I put out. So I don't have it as a monthly thing, where it's just sort of like I know I'll be, if I put out fewer episodes that month, I make less money.
Right.
And I'm at a point where I can say I can probably do about one episode a week if I'm really firing on all cylinders. And if I'm not, it takes me longer.
Sure.
And I can't really push that. I can't put more throughput through that particular system that I built. So I just kind of have to rely on just there's going to be repeat buyers and people who see value in what's being made, find value in it, the same value that I do, hopefully, or getting their customers to leave the bar after closing time, whatever works for them, and are willing to contribute. And I've found, I'm willing to do that for other people. I pay other people on Patreon as well. I'm a member for other, the music that I do on tabletop, use it with tabletop audio that I put in the background and stuff like that. So it's just a really kind of nice feeling to be a part of that ecosystem of just like, it's like being a busker.
Yeah.
You play your guitar and you put your hat out and you feel great if somebody puts $1 in.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like that's been a very organic process for you as opposed to this, giant kind of scheme that a lot of podcasters try when it comes to monetization. Now, when thinking about podcasts, when we think about long form audio, to me, it's a unique format because it allows you to spend, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is on, in the example of your podcast, perhaps a single emperor's reign, something that is difficult to do in probably a classroom or even in a TV documentary. What can the podcast format do for teaching history sort of better than traditional media? And where do you think podcasting still kind of falls short in that respect?
I think podcasting is where it is. I mean, it is so interesting that it's such a sort of a lo-fi kind of DIY low barrier to entry thing. You just have a microphone and an internet connection. You can basically do it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All of our fancy gadgets and what hasmos aside, it really is that simple.
Yeah.
If you want it to be. What makes it have become the kind of cultural, social force that it is? What is that draw that people have to that medium in general, and what does that relate to in history? It's a very good question. And I think it's that history in particular comes from and remains, when it's being done well, it's storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It is building meaning out of things that happened, and drawing lessons from it and learning something from it in a way that is guided and intentional. Heard it put, or maybe I put it myself at some point. Facts and data, that's like bricks.
Mm.
You need them. You got to have them. But you can't build a house out of bricks alone. You've got to have mortar to bind them together. That mortar is the narrative throughput. That's something that Chinese history has never shied away from. The way that they do this, they've done this all across time, is they kind of wait till the end of a dynastic cycle. They wait till the end of a dynasty. The next dynasty sweeps into power, clears away everybody else, and then they gather up kind of all the history documents, all the government documents, everything that they can get, and they put them all together, and they just say, okay, this is the history of Han, or Tang, or Song, and this is the official compendium volume, and this is the one. This is now the Book of Song. And so they're very comfortable with the idea of, like, we can take this information and we can suit it to our social political narrative as we see fit.
Sure.
So turnabout's fair play, China. Other people can do that too. You can do it for you can do it for good or for ill. It's true. There's a spin on everything, or there's at least there's a narrative input to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And where that, I think, translates into podcasting is that it's just right in it's right in your ears. You can do it while doing other things. You don't have to be paying focused attention with your visual cortex. You can be playing Candy Crush or mowing the lawn or whatever.
Sure.
You can still get that story and be swept away into that world and feel like you're in a different time and place. And it's the theater of the mind as well. Instead of being me going out of my way to try to find the perfect image of every single scene that I want to put into a YouTube slideshow per se, if I wanted to go and YouTubeize it, or if I wanted to worry too much about my look and my background here, that's a decision to make. Yeah. But I've found it at least works for me, and I think that's why podcasting works as has worked for as long as it has, is just being as simple an audio format as it often still is, even today. People like to be told stories if they're told well. And we don't need a whole lot of bells and whistles necessarily.
Now, going down that path a little bit further, you said anybody can do it, right? And you're right. Anybody with a microphone, anybody with an iPhone, they can pick it up and they can create a podcast. The technical barriers to creating a podcast have fallen. But, and I've asked this of other podcasters as well, I'm curious how you think about that sort of democratization, because yes, it can bring in a lot of new voices. It can bring in people that are curious about history, but it can also bring in people that have not so great intentions, right? People that are oftentimes paid to spread disinformation, misinformation, to question certain facts about history. I'm wondering how you feel about that sort of openness and the fact that it does leave a door open to bad actors.
It's a very good concern. It's a constant question and problem of the enterprise and the discipline and the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a perfect answer to it. I think I'm more in favor of democratization. I'm more in favor of having that door open.
Sure.
because I think one of the real risks with what has often happened with the higher level history, the much more academically oriented, university level and above histories, is they become so self-selecting and so insular and so walled off that not only is it very well protected, very well protected institution in terms of factuality and peer review and edits and things like that. Very, very good, but very small audience. Because everybody's very protective of their work. The institutions are very protective. You have to have a subscription to every journal if you want to read their articles.
That's right.
Very expensive to do.
Right.
And I mean, thank goodness for things like the Internet Archive.
Yeah.
The other library projects that are online. ctext.org for specifically ancient Chinese histories that are still in Chinese, it's one of the only places where you can find them digitized. Wikimedia, the primary sources that are on there. It's amazing what you can find online. But again, that's a double-edged sword, because it's amazing what you can find online. Yeah, how do you trust the source? How do you trust the interlocutor?
Yeah.
And I think that there is something to be said for my kind of laborious, slow, ox in the mud process of, I don't expect you to trust me for me.
Yeah.
In the words of LeVar Burton, but don't take my word for it. I try to be as transparent and as open with the sources that I use. I try to say, and I'm quoting here, here's where it is, and it's such and such source. So I just know personally, I'm operating as professionally and as transparently as I can be, and trying to hold myself up to that light of academic rigor and say, well, I can at least approach it as best I can. But for the listener, there is always going to be that element of like, well, who do I trust? What do I trust? And it does, I think, in many respects, the best version is if it can just be a built relationship, an organically developed one of, you've listened to me for a long enough time to know that I'm that you feel like you can trust me.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to lead you down some garden primrose path in terms of narrative.
Yeah.
And so there is that interpersonal, almost kind of one-to-one relationship that develops that I think is really important. And that's something that podcasting as a medium does better than I think many other media formats do. It's a particular form of relationship that podcasts have where it's kind of like one-sided, but it feels like a friendship relationship. You know what I'm talking about?
For sure. Yeah, it's that parasocial relationship.
Parasocial, that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Where it feels like I'm talking directly to the listener, just like it feels like when a podcaster's talking to me.
Yeah.
And that creates a sense of intimacy, a sense of, and that can lead to boundary issues sometimes. But I think it's overall positive. In terms of misinformation spreaders, in terms of bad shows that are out there, I think they often pretty quickly show through. They often pretty quickly kind of reveal their cards as to what they are and how they operate. Especially, I'm almost kind of a little bit lucky with Chinese history because those tend to be state-backed enterprises.
Sure.
Which are just kind of corny. It's playing all the wrong notes, and it sounds really canned.
Right. Yeah. It's transparent. You can see right through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the negative sense of that, hopefully transparently with me, it's a positive way. Hopefully with that, it's negative. It does take the ability to kind of be a critical thinker as a listener, not just be an empty vessel waiting to receive the knowledge from the ear pods, but being like, yeah, should I trust this? How do I know that I should trust this?
Yeah.
And what I try to do in the narrative is I try to kind of, it's why I said before, kind of like the historiography of the show is part of the show itself. I talk through the sources. I engage with them. I say, well, this is where we run out and we're kind of left to speculate here, but there's a few different possibilities. And again, if you've developed that sort of intimacy of trust with the listener, then I think there's a lot more likelihood that they're going to be comfortable enough to say, oh, well, I guess we just kind of have to be comfortable with not having a clear answer all the time.
Right. Sure. Yeah, I often wonder what would happen if, some of these platforms, like whether it's Apple or Spotify or, any of the other major podcast platforms, if they implemented, perhaps some sort of fact checker, or if they, as much as I, can't stand Elon Musk and what he's done to Twitter, and, as much as I don't like that, you have to admit that their community notes version seems to do a fairly okay job at sort of going, no, this tweet is bullshit, right? Or this is misleading or whatever. So I often wonder if a system like that could be sort of ported or implemented in respect to podcasts. But you're right. It's a very big, complicated topic.
Yeah, I agree with the community notes, or it used to have a name before Elon. It was something more tweet related, but regardless, it's a one of the few good services left on that platform.
Yeah.
But it runs into the same problem as all kind of fact checking services of, what is it? A lie runs 10 miles while the truth is still lacing up his boots.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, you can't, it's so asymmetrical, so hilariously asymmetrical that it is, this is why we are in the situation we are, because we have let that sort of rule the day, right? Okay, Chris, final 2 questions. First, what are 3 podcasts you'd recommend?
Well, I would say I've got to give a shout out to one of the oldest and best in the game, Mike Duncan. I know he's not active doing podcasts right now, but if you haven't listened to Revolutions, it's great. I especially enjoyed he swears unintentional schadenfreude that was the final history of Mars revolution, and how evocative that was of certain things going on as he was writing it. The very just so funny, and super well done all the way through. I learned a lot. I mean, even as an American history teacher, listening through the American Revolution and the French Revolution of that, and then the Haitian and the Latin American Revolution, that was just fantastic stuff all around. Really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Other than that, big podcast that I like that is not history, but it kind of links into my love of doing these strange tales. I like a couple of very good scary podcasts. One is Pseudopod, and the other is what is it? The No Sleep Podcast.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Great suggestions. Okay. And where can people find you online?
You can find me online at, primarily I am on Blue Sky these days. thhc.creator.blue. You can still find my Twitter handle, but I don't really use it. I don't like using that service anymore. I also have my website, which I'm terrible about updating. I will get back to it, I promise. And that is thehistoryofchina.wordpress.com. And if you want to email me at any point, my show email is, what's it? I forgot my own email. Louise. I think it's thocpodcast@gmail.com. That would be it.
Perfect. Okay, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on.
Of course. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk That Pod. Make sure to follow us on all the social places. Just search for Talk That Pod. And if you're not subscribed yet, this podcast is also available on YouTube at Talk That Pod Show. Also, if you liked what you heard, tell your friends about it. And if you really liked it, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And if you're a podcaster who wants to come on the show, go to talkthatpod.net and submit a request. Finding great podcasts is hard. That's why you should also check out Find That Pod. It's a podcast recommendation newsletter I write every week, bringing you 5 amazing new podcasts you should listen to. Subscribe today at findthatpod.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.